Pete. So great, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So yes, for Coffee with a Purpose, this morning we have two speakers, actually three, two topics, three speakers. We're going to have Kathryn Coughlin talking to us about her candidacy for select board. We've been fortunate to have the other two candidates at earlier sessions, and Kathryn will speak to us today. And then after she gives us a chance to hear about her for a little while, we'll turn to Ricky and Ian, who will talk a little bit about Ricky's planned event, which, as I understand it, is called Saving Democracy. Maybe that title has updated. That's scheduled for later this month. And then at that point, we'll open it up to questions. Normally, we start with everybody doing a bit roundtable introductions, but just to save time, I'm going to take the liberty of describing our group as a collection of folks that are heavily involved, often with very long histories in volunteer activities all around the town. Wide range of interests, a lot of environmental interests, a lot of political interest, social justice issues, many ones. But as people ask their questions, they feel free to elaborate on that. So I would like to, at this point, I guess, turn it right over to you, Kathryn. Thank you for joining us. And I'm glad you're
yeah. That would be good until you're ready to ask a question. If people could mute, please.
Yes, really good point. Yeah, please keep yourself on mute. Yeah. Okay, take it away, Kathryn.
Thanks, Doug. And thank you all for having this forum and inviting me. I'm glad I finally made it after a couple of reshufflings and things like that. So I'm running for select board, as all of you know. I have lived in the town for about 20 years and have volunteered in various different aspects. I've been a town meeting member for on and off for about 10 years, and I was on the zoning board of appeals for 5 years. I recently sold Sherborne Wine and Spirits, which I owned for 4 years, during which time it was really impossible for me to do much more than write checks to my favorite nonprofits, because running a business really just took all of my time. So I was very happy to sell my business. I loved it, but it was very, all consuming. And I sold it last May and began preparing to run for the select board. I've attended or watched almost all of the select board meetings in the last year, since last January, some planning board meetings, zoning board, or zoning board of appeals, conservation, a number of different meetings to get a sense of what was happening in the town and what I thought would be the most pressing issues. And I was recently asked what I thought was the single most important issue in town, and I'm hard pressed to answer that. I'll be very honest with you. Affordable housing is something that I think is very important, and we have, even though we've got 10.4% of our housing stock, quote, affordable, and I would challenge. I understand that 80% of the area median income is considered affordable. For a lot of people, it's just not. It's not affordable housing. We don't have enough of it, and I think the environment in town, water quality is a very serious issue. I sent an email to Tom Haladic last week asking how can we rethink using salt on our roads. I mean, I've done a little bit of research on it as to whether salt or sand is better. There are some new technologies, but unfortunately they also include chemicals. So hopefully he and I can have a conversation relatively soon. I'm a strong supporter of the town joining the Community Preservation Act. So for 22 years, we've, as Natick residents who've bought and sold homes, we've put money into the Registry of Deeds, and that money's transferred to the community Preservation Act trust fund, and it doesn't come back to Natick. So I believe the figure is over $30 million that Natick would have had we joined 22 years ago. I don't know if that includes the state match, but in any event, $30 million is nothing to sneeze at. I'm a strong proponent of not having a split tax policy for residential and commercial properties. Every year, the selectmen by law must hold a public hearing to consider tax rate options. And in Natick, because of the mix, we have a 1-to-4 ratio roughly of commercial to residential properties. If we were to adopt a split policy that allowed a 10% reduction in residential tax bills, which for the the median house value would be a savings of $87.50. That means that commercial taxes must go up 40%. And so that means a property like the Natick Mall, their tax bill would go from 4.6 million to 6.45 million. And I've met with Brookfield Properties, the manager at the mall, and that would be, especially coming on the heels of COVID and the impact on retail sales, that would be just a horrific scenario for them. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not concerned about taxes for at least the most vulnerable, and I am very concerned about taxes for people who are in financial straits. And I wouldn't only limit that to seniors, because we do have people in town who have 2 kids in college, who've been adversely affected by COVID financially. And so I would be in favor of a means tested tax exemption of up to $100,000 of assessed value. So in other words, if you had a $600,000 house, you would be taxed on $500,000. It's one of the reasons I feel strongly about joining the Community Preservation Act, because we could take some of that money and put it into assisting paying taxes for people who are otherwise unable to. So I'm going to wind up with, I mean, I don't have a single most pressing issue. I'll leave that to you to ask me about. Just a little bit about my background. I was born in Cambridge, raised in Florida, but spent my summers up here in Cambridge and in York Beach, Maine. I went to college at Berea College. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Berea, oh, Elaine, you're nodding. It's a great place. So Berea was the first integrated college pre-Civil War. And it was the first college to have men and women educated in the same classrooms. And it has a very strong emphasis on racial equity, on diversity, and on social justice issues. And then I went to graduate school at Georgetown. My graduate work was master's in Arab studies, and I did my PhD work in basically medieval Islamic history, and left graduate school right after 9/11 to go directly into public service. So as the recipient of the Harry S. Truman Congressional Award for Public Service, I have spent my entire life in some form of public service, whether it was in academia or in nonprofits, with the exception of that 4-year interlude where I sold wine. So I'd love to open, actually, Doug, I'll yield to you. I don't know if we're doing questions now or if Ricky wants to talk.
Let's see. That was a wonderful statement, and given that it is so early, maybe yeah, why don't we do questions now? Although, Ian, let me ask you, do you have availability? You joined us just a couple minutes late. What we were planning on doing was having both folks speak and then take generalized questions, but it would be nice to stay focused on Kathryn's candidacy, unless you're really time pressed and want to get to Ricky's topic.
I'm available to
Solid.
stay until 9:55.
Okay, good. Well, in that case, then I think, yeah, let's open it up for questions to Kathryn then. Who would like to go first?
Hello,
Yeah,
am I on?
yes, you are, Ricky.
Oh, I would urge Kathryn to expand a little on her background. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
It really is.
yeah.
Thank you, Ricky. So I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I think I've been to all of the countries of the Middle East and North Africa, with the exception of Lebanon and Algeria. I lived in Nazareth. So when I was at Berea was extraordinarily, it was an extraordinary experience. I went on a, Berea requires every student to work. And in exchange, you go, it only accepts students from disadvantaged backgrounds, economically disadvantaged backgrounds, and you have to have a high academic performance. So they let me go to the Middle East. I went initially in January of 1993 for a month, to spend a month in the West Bank looking at the application of international law. So the question is, if you live in an occupied territory and somebody steals your sheep, you don't have police and the army isn't interested. So how do conflicts get resolved? And I fell in love with the place. And so I faxed the school and said, I'm not coming back, and gave them 4 independent studies that I wanted to do. And they made it possible for me to stay for 8 months. So during those 8 months, I spent time in Egypt and in the West Bank doing various forms of study. The following summer, they let me fly to Istanbul, and I hitchhiked from Istanbul to Jerusalem along the Crusader route, ostensibly studying medieval military architecture, but really just spending time meeting people. And from that, I decided to do my PhD in looking at law. So my areas for my dissertation were gender and law, predominantly comparing Islamic law and Catholic canon law, legal anthropology, medieval Europe, and global Islamic political thought. And I've just been extraordinarily fortunate, coming from a economically disadvantaged background, to be able to travel as much as I have. I met my husband in college. He is from India, and later from 2004 to 2008, I worked with the State Department independently. I formed a nonprofit, and I worked with them to do public diplomacy in the Muslim world. So I spent a lot of time in Muslim communities in India and in the Middle East, trying to explain to them that Bush's foreign policy wasn't necessarily something that all Americans supported. And it was a very dodgy sort of, we had just invaded Iraq. And then there's this white blonde girl who shows up and says, oh, no, we weren't all in favor of that. But I've had an extraordinary life, and I'm very thankful to be able to be in a position where I'm retired and can donate my time and my research abilities to support Natick, which is a place I love. I've never felt more at home and anywhere else. So thanks, Ricky.
Yeah, Rick.
I feel that yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to follow up on your good question. I don't want to take us too far off if people have questions relevant, but I think it's relevant to ask, what sort of lessons might you take out of all that experience about the people in there, the diversity in the Middle East, and how people get along, and the law, to help us get through what will no doubt be a very challenging time, where we have to really look at our own laws and regulations moving forward toward becoming a sustainable community?
So I'm going to take your question through the lens of diversity. And so one of the things that I have found is people who ask me, why do we need a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer? or why do we need a program that looks at diversity in Natick? I have found that it is best that we're surrounded by people who don't think like us, who don't look like us, who don't pray like us. And the reason for that is when we and our children are exposed to a wide variety of people who aren't like us, we tend to begin to debunk the stereotypes that we've been bombarded with since childhood. We tend to think about people in ways that make them unique. So, for example, I learned very quickly in Israel that not all Arabs were Muslims, and there were Arab Christians. And not only were there Arab Christians, there were Arab Catholics and Arab Orthodox, and there was Melkites and Maronites, and it was just mind-boggling to me. And the same thing in the Jewish community. So in Jerusalem, I wouldn't walk through Mea Shearim at night on Shabbat, largely because the Orthodox don't want to be seeing women out on the street in their neighborhood on Shabbat. But I respected that. That's part of living there. And I think it's really important in Natick to be exposed. So Natick is 85 or 86% white. The Black community, there are 813 people who consider themselves, at least one of their racial identities, Black. That's 1.9%. If we increase our affordable housing and make Natick more attractive to invite people of other ethnic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, religious backgrounds, and political backgrounds, I think that can only enrich us. I think that can only make a society where our kids grow up understanding that there's more than one way to think or be.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
That's a good answer. I spent my career at the Federal Reserve Bank, and the president of the bank, Eric Rosengren, used to talk about diversity of thought. And the idea that it isn't just the right thing to do to have this diversity, it actually is best for the organization. Yeah. Diversification is always better. Kathryn, I've got a question. It's been asked, I think, actually by Jay Ball to previous candidates, and he's not here this morning, so I'll take the liberty of trying to ask it for him. And Ricky, you can correct me if I get this wrong, but the gist of it is, clearly you have your views as to the direction Natick should be going, what issues are important, and so forth. But as select board, you're member, that's a representative position, and so you have an obligation to some extent to kind of meet the will of the people, so to speak. How do you balance those two if they're not in harmony with each other?
It's a great question. So do you represent or do you lead? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, much more succinct. Thank you.
So it is a balancing act. And what I would say is this: as a representative, you bring the opinions or the position of the public with you. And it's inevitable that somebody in a representative position is going to have more data than a typical voter. It's inevitable, or it should be. And when presented with this data, if I were to come to a different position, my job is to do what's best for Natick. And so what that means is, as a representative, I need to go back to my constituency and say, this is why I think the town needs to move in X direction. And it's my job to be able to present that clearly, concisely, because it's important for elected people to remember that not everybody has the luxury of time. I think a lot about, when I think about my constituency, I think a lot about my sister, who works 60 hours a week and loves it. She's busy involved in her church. She's busy involved in social activities. And so she doesn't have the time to read a 4-page policy statement on why why her elected representative is doing something different from what she would like to see done. So that wasn't terribly concise, but it is a tension, and my job would be education. And that's something that I feel very strongly about. It's educating the constituency on what the issues are and what the data points are, and why the town should do X instead of Y.
Thank you. Yeah. Martin?
Yeah, I'm going to sort of go with the flow here and talk about something that's not my normal area of interest. I'll talk about open space in a minute, perhaps, but I think on the issue of diversity, I was very interested in that because there's something systemic in the Natick housing market that is sort of preventing the diversity right now. I assume, or maybe I'm saying it wrong, but is there I don't know how deep you've gone into the Natick 2030 plus report, but they have some ideas there about how to increase diversity of the types of people and allow if not something that's officially classified as affordable housing, at least housing that's more affordable than other types. So have you any thoughts about how to sort of move towards more maybe 2,000 or 1,500 square foot housing that more types of people can afford rather than more 6,000 square foot housing that, we really don't need it, I would say, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I live in a house that's 1,140 square feet and love every single square foot. On my little street, I live in West Natick, and on my little street, 2 homes that were the size of mine were knocked down within the last 2 years, and both have sold. One just sold on spec for 1.45 million. That means somebody didn't even see the house, bought it from California, and will be moving in. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think we need any more 6,000 square foot homes. There are plenty of them in town. Ideas about how to make Natick more affordable. I think we need to look at Ganesh's tiny homes. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. He wrote this, there was a committee, but wrote this brilliant report on the use of tiny homes. And we're not zoned for that. Our zoning laws, our zoning bylaws need to be examined from 2 points of view. One is making sure that we make it possible to have duplexes and triplexes and more condominiums or smaller footprint homes, tiny homes, and also to sorry, I just lost my train of thought, to increase housing, and then the zoning bylaws for economic development. Our bylaws are, there's so many things that could be allowed by right, but have to go through, channeled through the zoning board of appeals for exemptions. A great example about this in terms of economic development is a businessman who wanted to take a former restaurant in Sherwood Plaza and make it into a test kitchen. And what he had to go through in terms of the zoning board and then back to planning, back to zoning, and then planning again was absurd. And it cost, every time one of these guys are, every time a businessman goes before these boards, he oftentimes has a lawyer on the call, an engineer, maybe an architect, and he's paying all of these people by the hour to sit and talk about something that should be allowed by right. But I think our zoning bylaws definitely need to be looked at in terms of allowing smaller footprint houses on smaller lots. And I don't have a specific, I have an email actually into Terry Evans to ask her. I know they have a planning and zoning have a subcommittee that have been meeting to look at ways to change zoning. And I have an email into her to ask what the status of that is, but I don't have more than that. By the way, I just want to tell you, I love the sticker, the how do you tikkun olam behind you. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, for our temple here.
I love it. That's great.
Read it that far away.
Kathryn, as you were relating that story, you're touching on the frustration of this business person who's kind of getting tossed back and forth between committees. And if not that, sometimes what is sometimes the interminable sessions of town meeting, there's a general view by some that this town is is so inflexible, or it takes too long to get anything done, to be responsive. Do you have any thoughts about whether either you agree with that, or whether, what's the low hanging fruit to try to start to address that inflexibility?
I think that we'll see a change after the elections, and we have a new planning board member who is very sensitive to business concerns, who is running unopposed. And I think he will be a great asset to the planning board. We have a governance committee that's, I think the select board just did interviews last week of 14 people to choose, I think 9 to look at our form of governance. I think that, so I'm kind of torn. So on the one hand, I think that we need a moderator who can shut down that's the wrong way to, that's an inarticulate way of saying it, but town meeting, we have many people who will not run for town meeting again, or who will not run because we have the longest town meeting of any of our peer communities. And I have found that there are people who will stand up and say the same thing that was said before, and again and again and again. I don't know if the answer is a smaller town meeting. I would prefer, if I could make everything, I would prefer to have a 90-member town meeting where we have 9 people from 10 precincts, where we have contested races, so that the people who really want to participate actually get elected and participate. That it stopped. So we do have also people who are on town meeting, who have been on town meeting for years, who just do not attend. They run unopposed and they just do not attend. There are 6 communities in the state of Massachusetts that have bylaws that declare a seat vacant. So they don't remove, technically, they don't remove it, but they declare, the town clerk declares the seat vacant if a person has missed X many meetings. And so it's assumed that if you don't go, most of them, I think, so Swampscott's the strictest. They have a bylaw that says if you miss 3 meetings in a row, the seat is declared vacant. And all of them have appellate procedures. Most of them are 50% plus 1 meetings in a session. So I think that probably makes a lot more sense. There are many good reasons to miss 3 meetings in a row.
Right.
So I think that if we look at some of these, I think that's a low hanging fruit type thing, that a bylaw. And I know that there would be some resistance to it.
There's resistance to everything, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I've been on town meeting for many years, and that's always irritated me because, I really feel like I was elected to go to town meeting, not to skip town meeting and go do something else. But you're right. A couple times I looked through the town report where they report, who attended town meeting when, and there are people who never show up, and it is tough because their districts aren't getting the representation they're supposed to get.
Well, there's that, and there's also the fact that our bylaw requires a quorum of 91 people,
91.
so 50% plus 1. And if you only have, say, 150 people elected, and 50 people aren't showing up regularly, so it's a matter of also, representation, and then also wasting time as we wait around and text other meeting members to come down and at least make a quorum. I mean, that seems inefficient at
Yep.
best.
Yeah. Bill, you had your hand up?
Yeah, Kathryn, you haven't spoken much about the environment or the climate or the ways that Natick is going to have to deal with this issue, this national, international issue on a local basis. I wonder if you could just let us know what your views are on that issue.
So we have, we can't defeat climate change on our own, but the community has this amazing, ambitious 2050 net zero action plan. I've talked with Jillian several times about where we could be making progress, where are areas where we as a town are not making progress. The aggregation program is a great program.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, breaking up.
I mean, she does an amazing educating. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. There was
Oh,
just
you
a-
were frozen.
Why
Yeah,
don't you
now we-
start your sentence again so we can get it out?
Oh, sure. So we have this ambitious 2050 net zero action plan. And there are two aspects to that I think are really important. One is changing where our energy comes from and also how we use it. So moving our fleets to electric vehicles. The police chief has said that they are embracing moving their fleet to electric vehicles. And I think educating our neighbors and the community more about how to change where our energy comes from. In other words, joining the aggregation plan and then upping where we, going from the basic brown to the green, where we get 100% of our energy from sustainable sources. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, that's that's a start. I know the select board has an influence when we do the aggregation. And I'm looking for support to increase that default to a higher percentage of renewables.
Can you tell me what you think the downside would be of that?
The downside of increasing the percentage renewable,
Yes.
there is potentially a slight increase in the cost, but that's the dynamic that's changing. And I think the benefits far outweigh the downside.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with you. I do think the benefits outweigh the downside. And you're right that the increase is changing. As Massachusetts is changing where we get our energy from. So I would agree with you on that. I would also, well, I'll just leave it there.
I think I saw Carrie's hand first and then Rick again.
Yeah, hi, Catherine. I like what you had to say so far. Just touching on the issue of the aggregation program. I was co-founder of Renewable Natick, along with some other people here present today, and then had been on the Natick Sustainability Committee. When we first drafted this resolution that fall town meeting passed in 2018, the idea was to get to 100% renewable by 2050, as you mentioned. And just 2 years after that, it was clear that 2050 is going to be too far down the road. And we started evaluating things and looking at two state mandates, the Clean Energy Standard and the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which kind of mandated the towns increase their level. And there is a way we could get to 100% by 2030, but it does put a little more pressure on the select board. I think it is viable. And one gaping hole in this is the municipal buildings not adopting the same 100% renewable energy purchasing that the residents are. I'm not phrasing that exactly right, but what steps would you take to get the town to really raise its level and buy just 100% class 1 renewable energy?
So in principle, I completely agree with you. I'd need to look at the costs. And the reason I say that is in the next 3 years, we're looking at a debt exclusion and a cost, an override. And so I would really need to, and I will look at this. I will follow up on this and look at this. I would need to look at what that would cost the town and how that would affect where we're going with taxes in the next 3 years. So while I consider it extremely important, I also know that if we're looking at an override and in addition to the 2.5% and a debt exclusion in the next 3 years, I would want a better sense of what that would cost or how we could space that so that we make it like a 5-year commitment, as opposed to saying next year we'll go with, the buildings would go with 100% renewable.
Mhm.
But Corey, I will do research on that and I will update my website with what I've found.
Mhm. the planet can't wait. And Natick has been out front in terms of, leading this whole effort, from Metro West. And I think we can really, be an example for what other towns can be doing. So I look forward to seeing what your investigation in that, and just see what the cost benefit analysis would be.
Well, I mean, it's clear that the benefit is going, I mean, I agree with you. We absolutely need to do something. So just so that like in my personal life, I was one of the very first people who joined the composting pilot program. We still compost. My entire house is almost plastic free. So we use bar soap, bar shampoo, bar conditioner, silicone bags, not Ziploc bags. We don't use plastic wrap. I try to avoid buying anything in a plastic container. It's either glass or aluminum. We recycle so much that we actually use my neighbor, her recycling bin. She lives in New York. And so we have 2 full, I'm lucky to have that. So, I mean, my personal life is very dedicated to sustainability in the environment. I do also want to think about people in town who are really feeling a heavy tax burden. And I want to try to balance that. You're right, the planet can't wait, but if, politics is all about hard choices, right? But I'll look into that, and I will update my website with research on that.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
So I want to be mindful of the time here. I know Rick's had his hand up, and I also see Pat and Martin and Tom. But I also want to be aware that, Ian is going to need to leave before 10, and he and Ricky still need to speak to us. Why don't we take a couple more of those questions and then switch over to Ian and Ricky, and then we can do questions of anything, if that's okay with folks. So Rick, I think you were maybe first.
Well, I can put a question in a chat, and I know that Kathryn will give a thoughtful answer. It was just so people know what it was about. It was about how to make residents be more accountable for electric usage, as we are during droughts for water usage. And also, I'd love to see her do an open house on Earth Day all around Natick. Because I'd love to see the 1,100 square foot efficient non-plastic house personally to be inspired. Thank you. All right, I pass on the rest.
All right, thank you. That's a good challenge. Pat, why don't you ask your question, and then Kathryn, maybe you could respond to kind of both collectively or something.
Sure.
Yeah, the question here is for you, Kathryn, but also I think Bill maybe knows a little bit about this. I think I saw over the internet a few days ago that the town of Lexington had gotten a grant to get electrified school buses. And I don't know if anybody, I thought, Bill, you were following some of those things. And I thought that there maybe with the new, infrastructure funds and so forth, that there are ways for communities to do that.
Yeah, let me jump in really quickly. I know the school board has recently renewed their lease. They don't own their buses, but I would really encourage the select board and the school board to move toward electric vehicles as quickly as they can as that lease gets renewed. But let me stop there. And Kathryn.
I completely agree. So I didn't know about the grant in Lexington. Wrote a note to follow up, and I'll just stop there. I know we've got more going on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, people will permit the shift then. Let me move to Ricky and Ian to talk about the event that they're planning, and then Kathryn, if you've got the time and can hang on, you'll find this interesting anyway.
Sure.
And then we'll go back to open questions.
I would just like to provide the transition. About 2 months ago, maybe, when I first
You're breaking up, Ricky.
and with me. Oh, I invited her over. Is that better?
A little bit.
Hearing? At any rate, I just want you to know that in the time since I spoke with her for about 2 hours to now, Kathryn has done amazing follow-up on many of the issues that we discussed. And to me, it's just an exclamation mark on the validity and I hope she is one of our next selectmen. That was my comment. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, it kind of cuts in and out a little bit, but yeah, give it a shot and Ian can jump in,
Yeah.
in if necessary. So,
Well, let me tell you how this came about. I am approaching my 85th birthday this month, and the sort of the enormity of that number just hit me. And I'm very conscious of the passing of time and mortality. And so that led me to think about my family, my life, what, the early stages. And I've been putting together pictures and stories and memorabilia of my family. And with what's happened now in the last 10 days, I've been having a case of PTSD, or, the stories that my mother told me of our fleeing from Austria when Hitler came in 1938 have come alive on the TV every day. And I can't keep myself from looking at it. And I see the mothers and the children trying to get on the train. And Mama told me about that time for us when we tried to get out of Vienna and tried to get to Amsterdam. And we went by train and what it was like. And I'm seeing it now on the television. And it's a harrowing experience. And it just punctuates what my feelings are about this event. I wanted to celebrate my birthday, but I wanted to celebrate 75. That's what the March 20th date is. That's the day in 1947 on March 20th that we arrived in America. And I wanted to celebrate that, especially in light of what's going on now in the world. I know how significant that was in my life and how lucky I am to have been able to come here. We tried in 1938 to get here, but America said no, Canada said no. So many of the countries that we have to, even Shanghai and Bombay, we couldn't get in at that time. And we were so lucky that we got into Trinidad. I mean, we didn't know it at the time, but we were really, really fortunate. Even though we were interned, we lost our freedom for 16 months. We were behind electrified fences with guards at the door. So I'm not going to get into the whole story, but it's all part of a video that Don Porter, who is a fairly recent resident in Natick, did for me and with me, that I've shown it to a couple of people who said it's wonderful. And we invite you to come and see it. We will send you with a link, and there will now an opportunity to do several things. One, to say thank you to the town of Natick, to say thank you to America for giving me a home, for giving me refuge, and for giving me a life. I invite you to come back, and it is going to be a fundraiser. And the money that's going to be raised will go to battleground states, 3 of them, North Carolina, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. And those 3 states have been chosen because they are on the cusp of either being won or being lost. And we can't afford to lose them. Excuse me, our democracy cannot afford to lose them. So I have used the vision of my birthday, and more particularly my arrival in America, to focus my life and my time and trying to get people that I know and people that you know to get involved in the 8 months we have to those groups on the ground who are doing the work of fighting voter suppression and who are doing the work of getting people registered to vote and helping them to bypass the hurdles that have been put in place by people who are in them from voting. So it's a very, very important thing to me, and I hope it's important to you. I know it's important to you, whether you're aware of it or not. Let me let Ian take it from here. Ian? Is he there?
Thank you, Ricky. So I've known Ricky for many years, since I've been in Natick, and have experienced her as an articulate and passionate and insightful advocate in the town on so many fronts. And to hear Ricky's story, really touches my heart, and it's really moving and inspiring. And I am really glad to be part of planning this event on March 20th. I'll be there emceeing in some fashion, and it's a real honor. Thank you, Ricky, for asking me. And it'll be a chance for people to hear Ricky's story, because Ricky is someone who is awake and aware and active, and it's something we can all aspire to really understand who we are and find a sense of purpose and live our lives. And at this moment, it's what the world also needs, to save us from fascism, and save us from this descent into hate and violence. We really do need people to be engaged in democracy, and people to be engaged in building healthy communities. So I hope you'll all come, and when you get the invite, I hope that you'll also share that invite with others, because you're like Ricky's people. So you have to help us get the word out so that we can make this, as impactful as possible, because we do want to have an impact with this event. So we really would appreciate you, taking the time to, once you get the invitation, to write a personalized email to your friends, let them know that they will be inspired if they come, and they will find a way to make a difference, in our world by coming. So, try to help us. We appreciate your support, because we would like to, give people a chance to hear Ricky's story and then be inspired and to take action.
Where Ricky was breaking up just a little bit, could you repeat what we know of the logistics for this? So Is it a virtual event now at this point, or how's it
Yes.
going to work?
Yes, it is virtual. And we will send out an invitation in the next couple of days to give you the link for the event, which is March 20th. It's a Sunday and it's 2:00 in the afternoon. So we figure that's a really available time for most folks, I hope.
Yeah,
And it'll be an hour. So if you're doing something else, if you can take out an hour, you know, you can multitask.
yeah. And so it'll be this airing of this video that's been made, and maybe some other speakers speaking live during this hour. And
And there'll be a Q&A, an opportunity for Q&A, for people to ask questions. And Senator David Magnani will be on the call asking questions if there is a lull. If there is a time when nobody from the call is asking questions, he will have some prepared questions. And and the call will be live, so that it's not a pre-recorded call, so that people can ask questions if they have them. And we will try and this is a fundraising call. Make that clear, that none of the money goes to me. The money goes to 3 state grassroots organizations in 3 states, in Pennsylvania, in North Carolina, and in Arizona. And the reason it goes to those, let me back up. The donation will go to Metro West Blue and beyond. And that is an Act Blue link where funds will be collected that will be distributed to, in this case, the state of North Carolina. And there are organizations, we have 3 organizations that have been vetted for their efficacy, their diversity, and their need for money. There are some states that are battleground states that have such a wide reach. For instance, Georgia, with Stacey Abrams, their visibility is so great that they don't have trouble attracting money. But a state like North Carolina that has an open Senate seat and an open Supreme Court justice seat on their court, though that state doesn't have the visibility and the access to the money that Georgia does. So that's one of the reasons those as Georgia's Senate seat in the final tally, we need to be able to hold the Senate, so that it's crucial that we support, that we funnel money to a state like North Carolina that has the same needs, but not the same access to money. So that's the basis on which Metro West Blue chose to support the race in North Carolina. Not that people can't give to Georgia if they want to, but I'm just saying, as a grassroots organization, which is what we are trying to help the average voter who's not usually engaged in this level of political activity. We have done the research and the vetting and the groundwork to find the places and the people that need those resources the most, where they'll give you the best bang for the buck. And so that's the reason for going through Metro West Blue. And that's the group that I was working with OC 2020 and that we raised $55,000 And we really made a difference in every state that we got people to work. So it was a fantastic experience. And I just thought that on this occasion, I mean, I can celebrate with my family, but this does some good that will give me more joy than anything I can figure out. So
Thank you. I don't know what to thank you for. I could thank you for this announcement. I could thank you for your life of service, the inspiration of your story. It's an interesting bookend to have these two topics at the same time. Kathryn, you may already know this, but as I understand it, Ricky is the first woman selectman from the town. And here you are running, not that you would be the first, but or again, but
she's also the first Jewish select board member.
Yeah, man, but yeah, okay, I'm speechless. Who's got questions for
Doug,
either Ricky or
Doug?
Yes,
Doug,
Tom.
I have to go, but I wanted to tell Ricky, it's in the chat. This is amazing. I have a friend whose family escaped from Vienna on a train to Amsterdam in 1941.
oh
And I
my God.
will get him on the call. He will gladly, once I tell him what's going on, gladly Zoom in on March 20th.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to
Good.
let you know that.
Yeah,
I gotta go.
thanks,
Sorry.
Tom. Yeah. Who else has questions or comments or anything at this point? Sally, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I would just like to thank the dovetailing of Kathryn speaking with us this morning and Ricky's story. And I'm intrigued, Kathryn, with your unique Middle East life and how it's going to give such dimension to, I hope that you make it onto the select board. I think that will be pretty exciting. I was wondering, I'm fairly new to Natick and I'm learning, it does seem like the town meeting structure is so democratic with a small d, but so huge. And how does the select board get their information siphoned or organized to take action from such a large democracy of town meeting? What's the dialogue, or what are the channels there as you see them?
So I have to stop and think for a minute. So most of the select board, I think almost always attends town meeting. So there are two channels. One is that they review every article before it's put on the warrant. So whether it's a citizen petition or a warrant article that comes from a town or a town department or a board or a committee. So they see those and they go and then they attend the meetings and take their cue kind of from them. But also the select board is, as I've watched it over the last year or attended, they're very good about following up on comments and questions that are posted in Facebook. What's the Facebook group? Government and it's Natick Government and Chat or something like that. So when I know that all of them are on it, I'm on it, and when issues arise, I've seen them. Mike Hickey responded to something about the parking meters, for example. So the parking meters downtown don't allow you to purchase time before 9 o'clock. But if you have an 8 o'clock meeting, or if you're going to an exercise class at 9 o'clock, you have to actually wait. And so he followed up with that and then contacted the vendor. So there are a number of different channels. I've also found that a typical Natick resident may not reach out directly to the select board, but when they do, they're very responsive. Actually, I want to give a shout out to our professional staff too. So I have found that while I've been preparing for my candidacy, I have questions and reaching out to the tax assessor and saying, hey, Eric, can you explain to me what the impact of a split tax rate would be on XYZ? Can I get a copy of your presentation to the select board? Or contacting DPW about a question about their about road work or using salt versus sand. And I'm really impressed with the number of people who return phone calls, send me material, are happy to block off a half hour to have a conversation and answer questions. So I really want to give a shout out to them because they work extraordinarily hard. And I think they are as important to the town as town meeting. Sure. Thank you, Sally.
Cindy, were you, well, maybe she's just speaking separately. Okay. Does anybody else have questions? Martin, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, hi, Kathryn. Yeah, I figure I'll throw in some open space questions, but I'm Martin Kessel and I'm chair of the Open Space Committee and also on the Charles River Dam Committee. And I was just appointed to the 5 Auburn Street Study Committee, which is the Elliott School reuse. So that may affect housing and it certainly affects open space. So there's all these things going on in town. I've asked the other candidates too. We do appreciate your support of the CPA. I'm on the CPA advocacy group along with Jay and Ricky who are here, and Ganesh who is chair of that group. So we all appreciate that, both for affordable housing and for open space and also historic preservation. So the select board has more responsibility now, I think, than it had in the past for open space targeting. I mean, there's a limited amount of money, even with the CPA. We also have some other funding from the it's called the FAR fund. Mm-hmm. But, you know, open space is expensive, so we have to pick and choose. And the select board has been looking at some things, 22 Pleasant Street, it looked at Winona Farm, although that was all in executive session. And it looked at the Rockland Street property, and now we're talking about the Elliott School and how much of that to preserve. So what kind of criteria or priorities would you have for what open space is important and what stuff we just have to pass by, if you can even say that?
Sure. So I got a list from Eric Henderson, our tax assessor, of the chapter 40 A, B, and C properties in town. I'm sorry, yes.
It's okay, there's a lot of numbers.
A lot of chapters. So, and I went through them and I was somewhat disappointed to see that there's only one property that's available in precinct 1 and precinct 2. So in town, the place with the least amount of recreational space and open space is precinct 1 and precinct 2. And precinct 1 is our only minority majority precinct. For a number of reasons, but I would like to see us acquire property in precinct 1 and precinct 2 that would give those residents, I'm in precinct 2, so those residents give us some access, because other than the Cole Center, we really don't have any park space here. And there is one property at the southernmost point of Speen Street in precinct 1. I think it's a farm, or it's classified as farm or agricultural. Yeah, that's available. So I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see, you know, I would yield to the open space committee. I mean, I was watching a select board meeting earlier this year. I don't remember which property it was, but the open space committee said that they would not prioritize purchasing that property. It was in South Natick. Do you remember that, Martin?
I believe that was the Rockland Street property. Yeah.
Yes, it was Rockland. That's right.
Yeah. Although, you know, that we made out with that one, and one of the reasons we did prioritize it is because we knew we would get a cluster development if we didn't. And the cluster development is, it without any cost to the town, is providing 2/3 of the property open space. So
yes,
all these issues intertwine.
Right. And so as a select board member, I mean, I would clearly do my own research, but I would yield to the recommendations of the committee, because I know that you have a much more in-depth view, but I'd ask about properties in precinct 1 and precinct 2.
Yeah.
Other questions or general comments? At this point, we are after the top of the hour, so we would be looking to wrap up reasonably soon.
Well, I have to say that after an extensive conversation with Kathryn, I didn't think that there would be much new that I would learn in this session, but the whole thing has been new, especially in the way she has prepared in depth. She has been doing a lot of study on the issues, diverse issues. I'm very impressed. Thank you, Kathryn, for running.
Thank you, Ricky. So I do want to point out, if you look at my campaign website and you look under issues, there's only 4 issues. I have 5 other ones in draft. And if you look at the issues, it's because I've spent a lot of time trying to gather data. And I mean, anyone can say they're for environmental justice, but how does that translate into policy? And what does that look like? And what are the trade-offs? And so if you look at the policies that I've laid out, when Ricky first contacted me about the Community Preservation Act, I said, in principle, absolutely, but I need to know what that looks like. And so I spent a good deal of time doing research, and I'll be updating my website with more information. So for example, you don't see the environment and sustainability on there. It's not because it's not important, it's because I'm still doing research and writing. So I encourage you to check back on my website as I update things, or just if you go to my website and enter your email address, as I come up with new written policies, I send out a note saying, hey, if you're interested in this topic, take a look. So thank you, Ricky.
Yeah, that's a, a good endorsement.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing that, of providing written information. When our daughter was a freshman in college, it was during the 2008 presidential election cycle, and she was given a research assignment to look up the policies of the various candidates for president. And the most important takeaway from that lesson was how hard it was to find anything that you could pin these guys down on. So, I really appreciate you doing this.
That's because once you, yes.
Can you put your website in the chat, or tell us what it is so we can get to that easily?
I'll put it in here. It's kathrynfornatick.org. Did I write it? kathrynfornatick.org. There we go. Yeah, so there's only 4 issues listed there, but I hope to update. Like, for example, I have one on our alcohol policies. It's clearly not the most important issue in town. It's something I know a lot about because I owned a store, and as I was telling one of the other select board members, I basically memorized chapter 138, which is the alcohol policy, because I'd never been in the industry. I didn't want to make a mistake or break a law. So it's on there. It's not the most important thing. I'll be updating it. I hope this week I'll be able to get some of the other ones done.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
I just had a quick question, Kathryn.
Yes, Pat.
Thank you for joining us this morning. It's wonderful to hear about your experience and some of your ideas. I was just curious, maybe it was touched on earlier, I missed the first 15 minutes, the diversity task force committee, which I think Karen Edelman Foster has been working on. I was just curious how, if you could address, a couple of your ideas in that area, how we can diversify our town.
Yeah, I can do that really quickly. One is increasing our affordable housing stock. I mentioned early on at the top of the hour, probably before you joined, 86% of Natick is white. Our African-American population, or people who identify as African-American, is 1.9%, which is kind of abysmal. We have 178 people who identify as American Indian. 178 in a town that was founded as a praying Indian town is pretty abysmal. So affordable housing is really important. Diversity is important to me. I explained that I think it's really important that we surround ourselves with people who don't think like us, who don't look like us, who don't pray like us. By doing that, we begin to identify with people as opposed to the stereotypes and biases that we're bombarded with unconsciously from childhood. And the more diverse our town is, I think the stronger it is, especially diversity of thought. If we diversity of thought, I think, produces the best outcomes. We come from a wide range of, and also understanding that there are multiple stakeholders.
Yeah.
So, you know, and so that's really important. Diversity and equity and inclusion is very important to me.
Do you know whether we are actively recruiting in our Natick employees and staffing at the schools? And
We are.
are we doing something about that to include more
So
people?
the town has 2 HR departments, which is kind of strange. I talked to Anna Nolan about this and she explained to me the school's position on that. But yes, the HR departments are actively recruiting. One of the challenges is that you know, you want to live nearby where you work, and
Right.
Boston and Wellesley and Natick, Wayland, these towns are really expensive to live in. And
Yeah.
so then if you want to live by where you work, you're left with Framingham. And some people that I've talked to have said that they love the diversity in Framingham, but the schools aren't terribly strong. So if you're recruiting somebody with children, it's a challenge.
Mhm.
But our pay scales are with, how do you say, they're commensurate with our.
Competitive.
Yes. So they are actively recruiting. It's just a challenge.
Yeah.
If you're an African-American and you're being hired into an overwhelmingly white town, I think about it like this. When I worked in Cambridge, it was wonderful because I could go to the Middle East store and pick up Middle East products. I could go, there are a bunch of places I could go. If you're African-American, there are no hair places to get your hair done in town. And that sounds like a really silly thing, but it's not. You want to be able to obtain services in the town that you're working in, or products or things like that. So thanks for that question, Pat.
Well, it's been a terrific discussion. I really have appreciated getting the opportunity to know you a little bit better, and what it would be like to have you on the select board, which I think would be fantastic.
Thanks, Al.
So
much for this opportunity. This is such a great forum, and I'm glad I've put the Zoom link in my calendar, so I hope to be able to join you more often.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you have
Yeah,
my
we
email address.
would love to have you, and would, you know, assuming you are successful in your candidacy, we will then, of course, have questions every
That's
week.
right.
So what are you doing about this?
Oh, good. Something to
Yeah.
look forward to. You have my email address in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. I think my cell phone number, maybe, I'll just put it in there. I think it's on my website, but feel free to text or call anytime to share your ideas or thoughts or information points that I can kind of.
I see the cell phone. I don't see the email. I see the website, but not the email address.
Oh, maybe I sent it to just one person. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll make a copy of the chat and send it to people if they don't have a
And
copy.
I have a lawn sign on my lawn already. Any of you want one? I'm sure Kathryn has one for you.
I do, and I would welcome the opportunity to put my beautiful red, white, and blue sign on your lawn. So send me an email and I will get it out there.
Wow.
Oh, so since I have your attention, let me just tell you about a fundraiser I'm having on Saturday. It's going to be really fun. It's a virtual cocktail party. So you would go on the website. It's $25 per person or $40 for a team or couple of 2. You'll tell me what kind of cocktail you want. And then that morning on Saturday, I'll drop off the cocktails with cheese and crackers. And it'll be a Natick trivia contest. So how well do you know Natick? And I spent some time with somebody who's 5th-generation Natick and went through some of the questions. Some of them are kind of hard. So but you can sign up on my website, and I think it'll just be fun in any event. So
What time
7
what
o'clock on
time is it on Saturday?
Ricky, it's 7 to 9 o'clock on Saturday, or however late you want to stay. on Saturday night.
Sign me up.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah, that sounds like great
Sounds
fun. Just as a reminder for everybody, also on the calendar coming up, so the next
Yes.
two Coffee with a Purpose is we move from select board candidates to school committee candidates. We've been able to line up 4 of the 5 so far. So next week we have Kathy Collins and Elise Gorseth coming to speak to us, and we'll use a similar format. We'll hold off on the roundtable introductions, let them each speak for a bit, and then open it up for general questions. The subsequent dates will be in the follow-up email that I'll send out to everybody. So thank you again, all for joining, and particularly for Ricky and for Kathryn, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope things pass for you.
Thank you.